Yesterday, the end of the shir came up the issue of sfiros hagaha, and after your questions afterwards, I realized that you probably need a bit more explanation about that. So today's shir, I want to discuss sfiros hagaha, so we can clarify the last bit from yesterday, which is the end of Amud Yud Aleph from Achad Dugma, all the way through to the middle of Amud Yud Beis, Amnon Das Harib Menachem Irakanti. So I want to clarify issues surrounding sfiros hagaha, and then we will look at Shittas Arakanti, which will be starting Be'ezus Hashem. Okay, so we were explaining yesterday. If you Tzemach, you want to find on the end of Yud. Okay. So I'm going to talk about the sfiros hagaha, which is the end of Amud Yud. But Ikka will be starting today for you on the top of Yud Aleph in our Sefer on Amud Yud Beis. So yesterday we were looking at the Das HaMa'areches, the Ma'areches Elikus, and we explained how his perception of the notion of Sfiros, what we call Sfiros, and ultimately therefore what we call Atzilus, is both the Eiris and the Kelim. And for him, the perception of the Eiris and Kelim of Atzilus are that they both emanate out of Atmas himself, and they're both a gradual unfolding of that, a gilui hahelim of what was originally there. One is the keich habli gvul shebein seif, and one reflects the keich hagvul shebein seif. So in Atzilus, there's taka no gvul. There's no real gvul. The oir is meir begilui in a oifen of ein seif. The function of the gvul, the keich hagvul, where it really kicks into action, is only noilam as biyah. Ultimately, from the kelim of Atzilus, you get the lamed kelim of Malchus to Atzilus. You have the elam habriya, the neshama de briya. But in Atzilus, you just have the notion of keich hamagbil, not the inyan gevul. And I told you to have a look in the Derech Mesisacha. In the Derech Mesisacha, he gives the moshel from Ksiva, in the Pu'las Hayad. Now, the Derech Mitzvah, just to point out, is a biur on the Maimon of the Shavsa of Tov Kuf Samach Beis. Okay? And if you notice at the end of the ois in Derech Mitzvah, it has a bracketed hara sort of thing, where it says Halich Eira in Simon Chav, he has a different shitta. And he gives a different shitta. That's going to be the shitta of the Rakanti. That's why you got confused probably a little bit at the end when you discussed it. There he's referring to what it says in the Simon Chav, where he's going to Fishtas Rakanti. But which is because he says that's the Mishnah Achrena, because the Simon Chav was said just before the Estalkus in Tovkuf Ein Gimel, and that was written in Tovkuf Samach Beis, the Vishavsa. Our Maimon here Pasach Liyol is in Tovkuf Samach Vov. You're going to see how the Rebbe Shapir says he also goes according to the Rakanti here in the Pasuk Aliyah. But that's going to be, we'll see a bit later. That's the Shittat Ma'areches. And from the Shittat Ma'areches it appears that both the Oir and the Kli are just different names for the Oir. The Oir HaGvul and the Oir HaBli Gvul. They're not fundamentally different things. They're both Oir, both Dovik in the Ma'ir. And one expresses the keich hagvul and one expresses the keich habli gvul. Yeah? Now, what we said at the end, so the end of Amud Yud Aleph and Yud Beis, we brought this inyan of the sfiros hagaha from Ma'atzilon. And that was our way of explaining how it's taka gilui hahelim. Because these spheres, can't just say the kelim are this sort of novel thing that was created, and the Eir is Pashut. There's no notion of ischalkus. There's no notion of these chalukes of esespheres. Something was invented later. A bri yesh ma'ayin, which is what the Rekanti is going to say. In the Marechas, you can't say it's a bri yesh ma'ayin. Because why? Because we know there's esespheres hagnuzis matzilim. This notion of esespheres already exists. The union of ischalkus already exists. I take it no ischalkus, as we know it later, because it's esespheres hagnuzis matzilim, but it's a mocker for it, and ultimately it's nishtalshal to the esespheres datzilis. And that's what we were saying at the end. Now, what is this union of esespheres hagnuzis matzilim? Now the mocker that I'm going to give to you for this, which hopefully you have a chance to look up. It's a complicated sugya, but you'll find it in the second half of the Maima Achere Mois of Tofresh Ein Hey in Hemshech Ein Beis, Chelik Beis, and the Maima afterwards of Spartan Tofresh Ein Hey. Those two Maimarim talk about what we're going to talk about here, and you have the Rebbe's Maima of B'Shasha Ala Moshe Lamorim Tofshin Chof Hey, which is in Mulukat Hey, which is where the Inyan is very well analyzed. So I'm going to give you a shtikla, a kitzur of some of the Inyanim there. I recommend you look them up, and to give you a sense of what we're talking about when we talk about the esespheres hagnuzis. The term gnuzos means that it's hidden, right? Gniza, something gonuz, something that's hidden. So there's two types of things that can be hidden. You can have a helam sheyeshne b'metzias and a helam she'ene b'metzias. Talk about something, it's hidden in the sense that it's not revealed, but it's b'metzias. The thing which ultimately could be revealed is already in existence. It's just not apparent. We're not aware of it. Then you have a helm she'ein b'metzias. The even, it's not just until it's revealed, it didn't exist in the first place. It wasn't there. It wasn't b'metzias. It didn't have an existence. So the moshel we give a helm sheyeshne b'metzias is a gacheles shebeseich eshal heve shebeseich hagacheles. You have a flame inside a coal that, in contrast to the flame which is outside the coal, a coal that has a flame flaming out of it, which is shal heves she'al hagacheles. So when you look at the coal, you don't see any fire, but there is fire inside that coal, and if you blow on the coal, and you have to blow too hard, a flame will come out. So it's behelim, but it's a behelim sheyeshne b'metzias. Yeah? And a moshel for that would be a person's keiches hanefesh. So a person has a keich hamaskel. You could say that the shalheves b'seich hagecheles is already a moshel. But what is the moshel b'nefesh ha'adam? That is in metzias ha'olam. So b'nefesh ha'adam, you're having the keiches hanefesh. So a person has a keich hamaskel. But in the keich hamaskel, there's no seichel agolu. It's just the origin of seichel in the self. A person has keich hamaskel is the fact that a person is a sentient human being. He has the capacity for intellect. He's an intellectual of some sort, to varying degrees. That's a person has keich hamaskel. Now that keich hamaskel is what we might call the keiches hane'elamim, the hidden keiches. They're keiches hane'elamim, but they're in a manner of helem sheyeshne b'metzias, because through engagement with your keich hamaskel, you can understand things. You can have a seichel agoli. When you have a seichel agoli, where does it come from? Your keiches hagluyim, where do they come from? They come from your keiches hane'elamim. So it's a helem. Until you learn something, until you utilize your keich hamaskel, the seichel is not functioning. The seichel is not operating. once it's operating, it's a product of the keich hamaskil. So that's al derech, the gecheles, the shalheves shebeseicha gecheles. Keiches ne'lamim. Okay? But then you have a helem she'eina b'metzias. The mashal given usually for helem she'eina b'metzias is a tzura chalomish. It's a flintstone. So the fire in a stone is behelem. See a stone, there's no fire. And it's not apparent to you, but it's also not b'metzias. The stone isn't warm. The coal is warm. You touch the coal, you'd burn yourself. When there's a shalheves shebeseicha gecheles. When you touch a stone, you won't. And that's why, when it comes to producing a fire out of a shalheves shebeseicha gecheles, you just have to blow on it, without too much effort. But when it comes to a stone, you have to whack it. It has to be hagaha. It's with effort to produce it. Because it's not b'metzias. In order to produce it b'metzias, it takes a bit of effort, right? And so that's what we call a helem she'eina b'metzias, which b'nefesh ha'adam would be like the keiches ha'yulim, or the sort of the fact that the nefesh has a yecheles for all types of keiches. So there's a keich ha'seichel ha'yuli, has a keich ha'chesed ha'yuli, all of these keiches ha'yuliyim, these generative keiches, these potential for keiches, what we call keiches haklulim benefesh. So these important terms. Keiches ne'lamim is a helem sheyesh b'metzias. Keiches haklulim benefesh, which we sometimes call the yecheles of the nefesh. That's a helem she'eina b'metzias. A helem she'eina b'metzias means it's not mugda in that thing. When you think of a stone is not a mocker for fire. A stone can produce fire, right? Stones can produce fire. So the fire aspect, can't really say that when we use these two things, we can't really say it's, even in a helem she'eina b'metzias, you can't say it's not a metzias legamri, because the fact is it can produce fire. It can produce fire. It can be a mocker to the fire. It's not a metzias itself, but it's a mocker to a metzias. Right? The fire, doesn't. The wood is not going to produce fire. If you bang the wood, it won't produce fire. When you light it, it will. Or I don't know, something else. Plastic. Bang plastic hard enough, you're not going to produce any fire. But the stone, you will. So you've got to say it's mugda in a certain sense. It is. It's got a definition. It's not the metzias at all. So when we talk about sfiros agnuzos, sometimes we talk about sfiros agnuzos and we call it a shalheves shebeseicha gecheles. Sometimes we say no. We say it's like a helem sheyesh b'metzias. Sometimes we say it's a helem she'eina b'metzias, like a tzura chalomish. Al derech keiches ne'lamim or keiches haklulim benefesh. And that is what it talks about over here. If you look at the end of in the paragraph, the beginning of Lefi Anal in Amud Yud Beis, for you at the end of Amud Yud, we said, Lefi Anal muvaven the kelim heim bechinas elikus mamish, sheim bechinas atzilus gilui hahelem bechinas sfiros hagnosis matzilum. They are gilui of that which was behelem in the sfiros hagnosis. Shekva yesham behelem bechinas ischalkus shu bechinas keich hagvul. El lesham hu bechinas pshitas ha'ein soy v'lei bechinas ischalkus mamish chas v'sholim. And what does it say? Ukmei al derech moshel esa keiches hanefesh haklulim be'etzem hanefesh. So its moshel is the esa keiches hanefesh haklulim be'etzem hanefesh. The helem she'eina b'metzias. The tzura chalomish. But the problem with that, and it says v'achol bikein hanefesh hu etzem echad ruchni poshut. The problem with this moshel is that it's not a problem here, but I'm saying maybe this is what it wants to say. When it says it's Gilui Ahelim, there's something to be Gilui Ahelim, the thing has to be there beforehand. So, it could not be there in a manner, it's not there in a manner of Metzius, but it's there in a manner of Mokula Metzius. And when we say Esses Sfiros Hagnuzis, we're saying that they aren't a Metzius at all. There's a common expression, Ein Metzius Lignuzis. So if we use the moshel of Tzurach Halamish, and we use the moshel of Krichis HaKulim B'Nefesh, we're stuck with the problem that there's a shtickle Metzius there. And so...
not Tzurach Halamish, you mean as a case HaKulim? You mean...
No, even in the Tzurach Halamish. No, the Tzurach Halamish, even though it's not the Metzius Ha'esh, it's a Mokir the Metzius Ha'esh. So when we want to talk about Esses Sfiros Hagnuzis, we want to talk about something even deeper than that. Okay? And that's what brings us on to the inyan of the third mashal. There's 3 mashalim on Esses Sfiros Hagnuzis. And the Rebbe explains in the Maimah how it's throwing on 3 dargis in Esses Sfiros Hagnuzis. Sometimes you talk about Esses Sfiros Hagnuzis, L'mayla Me'atzilus in Keser, and then you talk about it in Ak, and then we talk about it Lifnei Atzimtzum. So each one of these mashalim is talking about the Esses Sfiros as they are in different stages of Ishtashlus. If we want to talk about Esses Sfiros Hagnuzis Matzilin in Eirin Sof Lifnei Atzimtzum, the mashal that's given with 9 base, and the Rebbe brings in the Chaf Hei, is the inyan of shemes, of names. Now, what is the inyan of a name? The purpose of a name is in order for somebody else to be able to call you. The function of a name is primarily for somebody else. Right? To the individual who has the name, why does an individual have a name? So that someone can identify them and call their attention, call them to and get their attention. If you're just in the middle of a room and there's lots of people and you don't have someone's name, how are you going to get their attention? How are you going to call them? So you call them by their name. Now, if you can't say that their name has nothing to do with them, because if it has nothing to do with them, they won't respond to you calling their name. They have a particular name. They have one name, they don't have another name. They have a very specific name. But that name that they have is not of any importance. Or, when I say not of any importance, its importance is completely behelem, to the point of being a helem she'ein b'mitzias klal. If you leave a person by themselves, they don't need to use their name.
They could even forget it.
They might even forget their name. But they don't need their name. Their name is of no use. Not only is it not, they're not even aware of the name. It's not apparent their name. It's not the Metzius. The name is only the Metzius as a means for somebody else to get you to pay attention to them. Now, before someone calls your name, so you can pay attention to them, there isn't even a mocker, there isn't even a circumstance where you're preparing to pay attention to them, or you're a mocker to paying attention to them. Until the person calls my name, I'm not in a state of ready to pay attention to them. They call my name, I then pay attention to it. The whole calling of my name initiates and triggers me turning towards them and paying attention to them. But before they call my name, what is that? The name is not the name that you call me by is not in a state of even potentially paying attention to you.
What?
It's just no before the name is called. Then there is no function.
If you're not in a state of responsiveness, then you won't respond. Are you saying somebody's had fainted, then you call the name?
We're talking about the name. The means by which I pay attention to you is a tool which can be best understood as a yechelis. Why is a yechelis? This is the real notion of yechelis. That the yechelis is that once you, we're using name as the example, once you call this name, then you trigger the response. But before you call the name, there's not as if there's like sort of a helm of a response which you're revealing. You're not revealing a response that was there in a hidden state. Because the means by which you did that with my name wasn't even Tevis Mokum by me. I'm not saying it's the easiest mashal. It's not the easiest concept. And so it gives the mashal of Shemus. But the Maimorim here, I'm based in the Hemshech, I'm based in the, and the Chafei, brings the inyan of mayim, of water. Talks about kamayim upon him, keineva adam ela adam. When a person looks in water, they see their reflection. Right? Now, the water is doesn't have itself any form. Water is given as the example of something which is poshut, has its own pshitas, right? So when someone looks in the water, they see a reflection of their own face, right? All of the contours, the color of your face, maybe even the particularities of your face are displayed and reflected in the water. But it's not your face in the water. It's the water itself. When something is poshut, it becomes, you have these two aspects. That it's completely poshut, and yet it reflects the other person's face. So when we talk about the stone, for example, as being a mocker for fire, when it produces fire, you don't say, "Oh, there's fire, there's stone fire," or you don't think the fire is part of the stone. It becomes like sort of a completely new, separate thing that's produced by the stone. So it's not as if, when you look at the pshitas hamayim, the water is not producing the face. The water cannot produce faces. The face is imposed upon it, superimposed on it, but not superimposed in the sense of it being a separate thing. It becomes it. It is the thing that becomes the face. That's the quality of the pshitas that we talk about when we talk about sfiros hagnuzos. That when it says here the lashon, that they are that's about the nefesh. Ela de sham hu bechinas pshitas are ein seif v'loy bechinas it's chalkus mamash chas v'shalom. There's no, when we talk about sfiros hagnuzos in the ein seif haposhut, the fact that you can have tziyur hasfiris there, that it is the ein seif haposhut, which is the tziyur of the spheres. And that is the notion of pshitas. It's dafka there that you can have it. Now, it's a shvar sugya. I'm not going to do it on one foot. But this is the quality that's saying that the face that's looking in the water is what appears in the water, and the water mitzad its pshitas expresses that face. So But it's not the pshat that it's sort of a contained koyach. It's what we call a yechelis. When we talk about something that's a yechelis to be something, the pshitas ha'atzmos has this yechelis to have spheres. But it doesn't create a sort of a dover mugbal, or there's any inyan of ischalkus. When you see the face in the water, it doesn't mean that face can sneeze, or that face can have an itch, or there's somehow it takes up space in the water. So you can.
It's not like it's milk though, because if you move your face, then it will.
Right.
And if you take it off, it'll be like a kalei haya.
Right. So you have all of these milas of it retaining its pshitas while still projecting the face. The pshitas can project these esespheres without it being a question on the pshitas of the oir. Okay? So that's more than what it says here. Here it's talking about a darga l'cheira loa, the way the Rebbe is mechalik into the three madrigas. Here's talking about the keiches now klum b'nefesh, which is already a lower madriga according to the Rebbe's biur. But I just wanted to give you a kitzur of a little bit what it says in the Ein Beis, what it says in the Chaf Hey. It's truly a gewaltige sugya, but hard work. But it's kedai to look at the Oasis a little bit and see how it fits in.
Which mine Chaf Hey?
B'shash al Meish Lamorim. It's in Maluk at Hey. Was Muga was given out as a contrast and Shavuos Tafshin and Aleph. Okay, so that's the Dasa Ma'areches. The reason why I think it's Moshe Negei over here, because it talks about here how it's a Gilui HaHelim and how there's an inyan of Sfiras Lamaila. And the inyan of Keich HaGvul and Keich HaBli, but you have to understand the pshitas of the inyan, the way it is Lamaila. That's entirely b'pshitas. But not to lose the main nakuda. What does the Das Mareches want to tell us? He wants to say that Sai the Oiris, Sai the Kalim, are Atzilus, when we use the term Spheres, we mean both the Oiris and the Kalim. They're both Giluyim of the Keiches Magadosh Baruch Hu, the Keiches of Keich HaGvul and Keich HaBli Gvul. Yeah? Okay. Let's start the paragraph Amnon Das Reb Menachem Rekanti, the Sefer Tamei HaMitzvah Shalai. Menachem Rekanti, around 1300, Italy, in Rekanti.
I checked it up. It's in
Recanati.
Mid-East Italy.
Yeah, in the eastern side.
Just now.
Yeah, in the Adriatic Sea. So Makubal. He has his Pirush al HaTorah, his Sefer Tamei HaMitzvahs, and one of the very important Mukubalim, the early Mukubalim. So he says in his Sefer Tamei HaMitzvah Shaloi, and Huva Ba'arichis L'Sheini B'Chayit Per Gimel. So Chayit is review the Chayit, who wrote a Sefer. Interestingly, his Sefer Minchas Yehuda is a Pirush on the Sefer Ma'arechas Elikus. But so he only really that's really his only Sefer. He's a lot later. He's already about 1500, also Italian. And he wrote a pirush on the Sefer Marechas Halikus. And there, it's a whole pirush. So he also brings from the Rekanti there. And he brings his Lashon much more barichas. We also find in the Pardes of Meshach Doveru, the Ramak, Sha'atz, Mitzvah Perik Aleph B'Ktsara. So Arichas in the Chayit and in the Minchas Yehuda. And Bekitza in the Pardes. What does the Rakanti say? Asher Ika ha'atzilus hein ha'oiris ha'mispashtim ba'akelim. When we say atzilus, and the term atzilus means that the thing is elikus, and the thing is in the sense atzilus in the sense of ha'atzolav afrosha, that it's an expression of the oir, which is mein amoy, and all of that. What do we mean? We mean the oiris. Ach etzem hakelim einam atzilus mamish. But the kelim are not. There's a fundamental difference in the Eiris and Kelim. Not like we learned that we just think about the Eiris and Kelim as both Giluyim of Eiris coming from Atzmos Ein Sof. Just one being a Giluy of the Keach HaGvul and one Keach HaBli Gvul. But rather, they're two very distinct entities. You have the Eiris, and the Eiris have all the qualities of Eir. Eiris meina Mo'er. Kelim are not Eiris. Kelim are a whole different thing entirely. And they're not Atzilus Mamish. You're going to see, they are Atzilus to a certain extent. This is going to be a long biur, so we're not going to go through the whole thing. But just to give a sense of what we're going to say, that when we say the term Sfiros, what we mean is the Kelim. Sfiros, meaning, when we say Sfiros, we mean Chochmah, we mean Chesed, we mean Malchus, and we mean all of these Hagdoris. That refers to the Kelim, and not to the Eiris. Because the inyan of Sfiros, that there can be a Chochmah, and there can be a Chesed, is the inyan of Gvul. It's the inyan of Gvul. And in the Eir, since it's Me'ena Mo'er, it's not shaykh that it should have the inyan of Gvul. And even after it's mislabish in the Kelim, it retains its pshitas. The Eir keeps its pshitas. The Eir is Atzilus. The Kelim are Bria Yesh Ma'ayin. Now, not Bria Yesh Ma'ayin in the same sense as Eilam Bria, but Bria Yesh Ma'ayin Legabe the Eir. We say that the Kelim is we're going to say how the Kelim come from the Rishimu. The Kelim come from the Rishimu. They're a whole different thing. Such a thing called Kelim. They come from the Rishimu. It's a whole different story. And then you have Eiris. And the Eiris mean Amoy, Dovik in the Moy. And it's Bligable. So, he doesn't say it's not Atzilus at all. Just it's not Atzilus Mamish. The notion of Atzilus in the Eir is a completely different notion of Atzilus in the Kelim. And when we say Sfiros, we mean Kelim. Because you can't say that the Eir is Geder Chachma, or the Eir is Geder Bina, Geder Chesed, or anything like that. Because the Eir is Pashut. The Eir is Me'ena Moy. And that is the Shittas Arakanti. Now, if you go back to the Derech Mitzvah that you learned, that Ha'ara is pointing out that in the Simon Chaf, he's L'cheira going like the Rakanti. Because there he says the Kelim are Gvul Mamish. Gvul V'tachlis. Right? And that is not like the Gvul of Eilam Esbiyas. We've still got work to do to explain all of this, which we will do Be'ez Hashem.
Definitely not like the Marachas, though.
But not like the Marachas. No. So I'm just going to read the first part of this. This is going to be a long sugraim in the hagaha. And he wants to say over here, just read the first few lines, the nira dekain hu kavonas rabbeinu zal bidrush zeh. So it appears that this is the kavona, the Alter Rebbe in this maimah. This maimah, pasach liyot tov kuf samach vav. The kavona is like the Shittas Arakanti. Because he says that the spheres are just called levushim, levushim yuchadim, and all the things that come with it, but they're just levushim, and they're not the atzmus. They're not the thing itself. Ben kegazim b'yad ha'chitzev, it says little perik aleph. They're just like an axe in the woodchopper's hand. So the kelim are sort of the means by which the oir is poil. The po'ola comes misad ha'oir. But the Eir is Poyal al Yidei HaKelim. This is also the beer of if you think, you apply it to other things you learn in Midaita Moskva, the Eiris and the Havayin Alikim. Alikim is Kegazim Yad HaChitzev. Right? It's the same Musuk. They're saying over there. Very similar idea. There's a means by which the Eir can be Poyal. It's not the same thing as the Eir. Harizeh kedas Harav Menachem Rekanti Shekosov Sheba Sfiris Hein Kekelim Biyad Uman Ve'Hein Levushim Sha'oirin Seif Mislabish B'Seicha. Okay, so it's an important Hagdara. Now we're gonna skip now to the end of this paragraph, the end of this Sugraim, which takes you through to Omid Tes Vav.
What does it say in between?
Which for you, Tzemach, is going to be Omid Yud Daled. A few lines from the top. There should be an end of a bracket, about 5 lines down, 5-6 lines down. You have it? So just go the last 2 lines before the end of that Sugraim. Hayotze mikol hanal hu da kavonas Rabbeinu zal b'durseh hu al pi shittas Harav Menachem Rekanti zal da kedim einan atzilus mamish va'oir hu bechinas atzilus. Okay, just know that's what he's doing in that Sugraim, but it's, as you'd imagine, it's complex, and I don't want it to throw us off course. Now, let's start analyzing the Dasa Rekanti. The Inyan Hu, Kavishakos, the Bekama Mekaimes, the Pirush, Va'chochme Ma'ayin Timotze, explains in Chassidus many places that the Pirush of what it says in Eiv, Va'chochme Ma'ayin Timotze, Shenimtz or Ma'ayin Lemtzias Yesh. The Chochme, meaning Chochme Vatzilus, it's Nimtz of the Metzias Yesh, Me'ayin. So it's the union of Yesh Ma'ayin. Chochme is Yesh, and it's Nemtzich von Ayin. Its manner of emergence, of Ha'atzola, is in a manner of Yesh Ma'ayin. V'zel shekosov, and that's what it says in the Nusach HaBracha, Beiri Kedeshim Mishtabach Shemcha. What does it mean, Beiri Kedeshim Mishtabach Shemcha? Kedeshim in Bechinas Chachma Bina. Kedeshim is a reference to Chachma Bina, because the Kedeshim and Nivdalim from the Midas, the Seichel. And Ba'al Omar, and what does it say in the Bracha? Beiri Kedeshim. Creates Kedeshim. Bria. Shein Bria Yesh Me'ayin. Kumashkos Likut Etir Deva Masko Shat Seisai Tishmeir. So fragt der Rebbe, the Cheder in the Movin, the Cheder doesn't make any sense. Ech nemal a Chochme, she Bria Yesh Me'ayin. Ba'aloi him is Sfiris Da'atzilus. We're talking about Chochme Da'atzilus. Chochme Da'atzilus, we thought was Me'alim El HaGilui. That's the whole lineage of Atzilus. And now we're saying it's Bria Yesh Me'ayin. What's the pshat? Ache Inyanu Kanal. The explanation is, like we've just said above, the Ikra Atzilus or Eiram is Pashit Me'irin Seifam Mislabish Bekelim. When we say Atzilus, we're referring to the Eir. That Eir, it comes from the Eirin Seif, which is Me'ena Ma'ir, and is Mislabish in the Kelim. On the Makelim, Hein Bria Yesh Me'ayin. We're talking about the Bria Yesh Me'ayin of Chochmah Da'atzilus. We're not talking about the Eir, we're talking about the Kelim. Chol Ma Shenim Devarim Hamerim Hagvul, and similarly, wherever you're going to find references to Atzilus which indicate Gvul, K'may Reish Lamed Vav Alofim Rabovis Pasois, V'chein V'yered Havaya V'yal Havaya Chuli U'Kedeime Hakol Ala Sfiris Nemer. All of these are references to the Sfiris. What's the Sfiris? We've just said it's a Leimar, i.e. Ala Kelim. This is a reference to Kimshim. Briyesh Me'ayin, B'shaych Behem Metzias HaHagbola, B'shinu HaPu'ulis, B'mideis Chesed Gvura, V'rachmim Chuli. There you can have Shinuyim. You don't have to worry and answer and be concerned about the fact that there are Shinuyim in the Kelim. Because it's not the Etzem Inyan of Atzilus. It's like a Briyesh Me'ayin. Of course there's Shinuyim, just like in all types of Nivraim there'll be Shinuyim. Amnam Eirein Seif HaPoyel, the Hasviris, the Eirein Seif which is mislabish in the Sfiris and is Poyel Al Yodam, Ein Bei Shum Shinoi Klal, Beloy Yishtane B'Shum Pu'ula Me HaPu'ulis. and does not change, doesn't get affected at all by any of these pu'ulos. The shinui is mitzad hakelim. Now this is going to now go into a whole interesting arichas, which takes us into sort of the inyonei chakira as well, about the toyarim. How can you say the Eibishter has this description? You say the Eibishter, like in the Rambam, all the toyarim, and it's before the whole machlekes in the Rambam and the Maharal. How can you say the Eibishter is this, and the shinuyim? One of the arguments is the shinuyim. So we're going to go into all of that too. But for now, I want to leave that there. Just introduced the initial notion of the Rakanti. We have a few things to clarify, make sure we understand what it says in the Ayin Beis in the Chav Hei about Esiris Agnosos. And then I think we'll wait a day for the next year. And I'm going to give you, I'll give you something to learn as a hachana to this. But I think that you might have done some of this stuff already. But we'll see. This you should have had also in Hamanos Elikus. You have about Ribui and Shinui. Madura Kama is about Shinui. Madura Basra is about Shinui. Ribui. Why there's no Shinui in HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Why there's no Ribui in it? Because of the Sfiros. The Madura Kama and the Madura Basra in East Daled of Hamanos Elikus, I think is dealing with this too. So maybe you already learned that. So it's probably good to do a chazara of that and get yourself ready for this. Toif.